dear friends, some that I see every week and some I haven't seen for years. Uh, I'm really moved and just excited to be with you all tonight. And of course, at the center of it is Douglas, my cousin, my spectacular cousin. I'm going to tell you a little about him. Uh, of course, at the heart of the gathering, besides Douglas, is his new book, but he has published novels such as The Journey of the North Star and Dreamers and Their Shadows. He has written texts for operas that were presented um, at in Santa at the Santa Fe Opera, Gail, and and at the uh, Munich Biennale. And let's see what else. I think I might have said he is a poet and a translator as well. Um, he's been published also in Tricycle, Descartes, New England Journal, Parabola, and many other places. So his life and my life have been woven together for over 70 years. It is a stunning thing to go on a new adventure with you tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to you now, Douglas.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Mary. And thank you, Liz. Good evening. And I'm very grateful that you're all here. And I wish I could see you all at once. But even so, this is really wonderful that in this time, it has given birth to these kinds of meetings, which bring people together from all over the world simultaneously. It's terrific. And the Phoenicia Library, which is hosting this event, is a remarkable institution, which truly has risen from the phoenix-like, from the ashes, and it has become, if anything, a more powerful and sustaining resource uh, for those in the community, but I think also for those of us further afield. So thank you all so much for that. I also want to thank Askold Melnichuk, Ezra Fox, and Jess Carlson, and all the team at Arrowsmith Press. And without them, the book wouldn't really have come into the public eye in the beautiful way it has. And I'd also like to thank James Shaheen, Gabriel Lefferts, Emma Varvalukas, and many others at Tricycle, where a lot of these essays first appeared, and they've been very steady in supporting the things I've been doing and being interested in them, which is wonderful. It's a great magazine, and if you have any interest in topics related to Buddhism, please take a look. And finally, there should be, or further thanks to Emilio Ambas and the Leaf Foundation for his and their kind and generous support. And finally, I'm forever and happily indebted to my wife, Deborah Marshall, and to many friends who have provided all kinds of help and encouragement for a terribly long time. Thank you. So thank you. The Age of Waiting, which is the book in question, is an assemblage of memoir essays, each of which in turn is made from fragments and stories and poems, and some of which is from Buddhist background, some not, and also personal memories. I hope that this way of and I've always hoped that this way of combining things would create kind of landscapes or gardens where the proximities and distances between the elements that one reads change as one moves along, and they suggest unsuspected possibilities. And I particularly hope that readers will discover things that never occurred to me. This book came out of a larger and general awareness that we are all living in a time when we are more aware of things coming apart. We're deeply uncertain about the kind of world that is emerging. So it's clear we need to find new ways of thinking and new ways of looking and imagining and new ways of engaging with all that we have inherited, both as members of this culture or whatever culture we're in, and just as simple occupants of the earth. To do this, it seems first and foremost we must look really carefully and closely at many things we have always taken for granted or sought to ignore. And it's a traditional strength of Buddhist philosophy and practice uh, to engage with the world in this way. And so that's why it's a continuing reference point, both in the book and in my life, actually. So I'm going to I'm going to begin by reading as a part of a section on sickness. Um, this is one of 4 linked essays. And as many of you know, before the Buddha, which means awakened one, had discovered his vocation um, and had begun to live as a teacher, he was a prince named Siddhartha. His father didn't want him to become some kind of seeker or teacher. He wanted him to be a king, and so he tried to hide all the suffering of the world from him. He kept him in a domain of predictable comfort and palatial material ease. But Siddhartha became curious about life beyond the enclosed world of such a world of comfort and luxury. So, with his charioteer, he sneaked out on 4 separate occasions. And on those occasions, he discovered sequentially the reality of old age, sickness, death, and the possibility of a path not devoted just to worldly accomplishments. So I'm going to start from with this on reading from the one on sickness, the section on sickness. I dream I'm descending in an old oak-paneled elevator. Suddenly, I'm aware of someone behind me, tensing. I turn. A wild elfin man in a tweed suit with wild orange hair, a face like Mr. Punch, is leering at me. I am terrified, powerless to move or cry out. My heart stops. I panic. Suddenly, I wake, very weak, covered in sweat, still unable to move. Bright sunlight blurs on the edges of the window. Warm white sheets are absorbing me. When Prince Siddhartha returned to his palace after seeing the sorrows of old age, for many weeks he could find no peace or pleasure. Eventually, he returned to the pastimes of a prince, and he became again involved in studies, swordplay, and luxury. But his curiosity again returned, and he decided once more to ride in his chariot through the city. As Siddhartha rode past a shouting and laughing crowd, one man staggered from the bushes and fell beside the road near his chariot. People looked at the man but quickly moved away. No one would help him. Siddhartha asked the charioteer, "Why is this man lying there, shivering but covered with sweat, with a distended belly but withered arms, pale as ash, white spit dried around his lips, and moaning in agony, crying for water?" He gasps for breath, but those walking past avert their gaze and shun him. "Oh, charioteer, what is this man?" The charioteer answered, "My lord, this man is sick. Disease has ravaged his body. He is weak, yet he too was once healthy and strong. People avoid him lest they too catch his illness." The prince looked at the man with pity and asked again, "Is this affliction peculiar to this man, or are all creatures threatened with sickness?" The charioteer answered, "We too will all suffer from some such affliction, O prince. Sickness prowls constantly through the world. It feeds on everything alive and cannot be escaped. When the prince heard this painful truth, he began to tremble like a moonbeam reflected in the waves of the sea, and he uttered these words of bitterness and pity. People see suffering and sickness, yet they never lose their ambitions. Oh, how great must be their ignorance. They're constantly threatened with disease, yet they can still laugh and be merry. Turn the horses around. Our trip has ended. Let us return to the palace. I have learned to fear sickness. My soul turns away from the world like a flower deprived of light. It is withering. From time to time, and for no known reason, approximately 200 different kinds of cells, each with as many as 20 subgroups, coalesce in a complex dance, coming together and dissipating at varying rates, replacing themselves or not. They move through time and space, adopting momentary configurations in gestures of complexity, power, and grace. Just like the galaxies that take shape on a much vaster scale of space and time, the purpose or meaning of these temporary configurations are subject to constant speculation, terror, belief, legend, dream, and myth. Names have been given to each cell according to the functions which humans value. There are surely many other kinds of cells in these configurations, but their functions are neither valued nor known. Here by name, and so then there's 2 pages of names of cells that are things like sensory transducer, auditory inner hair of organ of Corti, auditory outer hair of organ of Corti, basal of olfactory epithelium, and so forth. The cell types emerge, proliferate, decay at varying rates, are replaced or not. They dissolve back into space and emerge in new forms. 37.5 trillion such cells call out, draw together, bind, release, expand, and contract in a pattern known as a person. Meanwhile, trillions upon trillions of different cells drifting in empty space are coalescing as colonies are swaying, dissolving, reforming, continuing, even as they are mysterious clouds of viral colonies, known or unknown to each other, and are on the move. These have no memory of continuing, only the fact of continuing. Just as tribes of humankind multiply, migrate, and take possession of the earth, all for reasons they themselves do not know, viral colonies stir. They are dislodged when the permafrost beneath the campfire thaws. They move when a bird eats a spider in the high forest. The bird is shot, cooked in the fire, eaten. The shamans of the north have seen these minute beings on the move. They pass through denser forms of space in soil, pond, waters, flesh. They sense themselves only as cloud taking shape within other forms. They change the lives of those they inhabit. They change the actions of cells dancing in the shape of skin, brain, blood, and inner organs. They change our experience of mind and world. In the life of persons, patterns intersect with other kinds of patterns, and this dance changes both. The interaction causes elements in the pattern that is a woman or man or child or elder to sicken. They weaken as organs fail, and the larger pattern moves towards incoherence. Experienced as fever, as cold, as dementia, paralysis, impairments, and pain of all kinds. This is sickness. Okie doke.
Thank you, Douglas.
Thank you, Susan.
You know, I know a few of us have questions for you. That particular section for me, and including the pages you omitted that have names of a million cells. I don't know how many there are, but it seems like many, many. There's such a rhythm to your writing. I think of the book as very musical, like, and that particular section felt very, the rhythms of it change all through the book, from poetry to a story to a list of cells, and since you've written librettos and since music is such an important part of your life, just wondering how that supports what you write or informs what you write.
I think probably it affects the way I think things make sense. That things make sense because they're rhythmic or because they balance a different rhythm or a different tonality. And since writing involves more rewriting than anything else, that's actually what I'm thinking about.
Mm.
And yeah. And since I was a child, music was, if I could have been a musician, I wouldn't have done this stuff.
It's interesting too, because I also thought it was very painterly, your book. And when you talk about tonalities and sort of thickness and thinness, and these pieces were written over a fairly long period of time what separates them in years, would you say?
It's probably over the last 6 years.
So weaving them together, I think must have been, were they chosen all for a specific reason or just to develop what you're talking about right now?
Yeah, sometimes it was just musical. Oh, that would sound good there. Also, I have to say, Askell Melnichuk, who's also a terrific novelist at Aerosmith, was very, some of it was at his suggestion and some was in resistance to other suggestions, so we had a definite interplay about all that, which was very helpful, and so I wouldn't say any of it is because he wanted it or didn't want it, but it was just out of a push-pull. And also, I mean, he believed in the book, which was astounding to me.
I have one other question that maybe I can be the only one that asks in a way, because since we've known each other all our lives and we come from the same ground, which was suburban New Jersey in the 50s, I've wondered a lot. You always were, 4 years out from me. I remember things like Chinese herbs boiling on the back of the stove.
Yeah.
Like, what is Douglas into? It's different from other people. And, when you read about Buddha's life and you talk about curiosity as one of the things that pulled him into other directions than what had been prescribed for him. I'm just wondering, what were some of the things that pulled you, or the people, or the events? How did you get from suburban New Jersey in the 50s to right here now?
Gosh.
I know. In a few words.
If I asked you that, because you'd also had a similar thing, I think just a sense that there was a far more something. There was something far more possible. I mean, I don't think there was ever anything laid out for me particularly, but also there wasn't anything in the milieu where we grew up that you thought, oh gosh, I really want to do that.
Yeah.
So we just had to kind of flounder around, and then I was fortunate and found Trump Rinpoche. But it was also fortunate to be in the late 60s and early 70s, which was immensely fertile. I mean, theater stuff was just fantastic, and much crazier social arrangements than had been previously the case.
That's, yeah,
You
so
know.
there are two directions. I hope, I'm gonna yield, I hope, to Liz or Mary. You have anything you want to tag on here?
Yes, I felt like listening to you read that passage on sickness. I felt your own visceral understanding of it, your own experience of that, and what and sickness as an incoherence. And I was wondering, you know, and the way you described the coming together and the pulling apart, you know, the eternal sort of cosmic, but also in the body. And I was thinking, you know, why with things breaking apart, pulling apart these days, you know, the last 6 years have been the most tumultuously negative. It was like the fertility of the late 60s and 70s, and contrast that to the last, you know, 6 years. um why do you write? Like, what is that a sign of? Is there like a flame of hope in you? Is there, is it that you want to bear witness? um that's, I hope that's clear what I'm asking. um
Yes.
Thank you.
Um, well, I spent a lot of my life in a state of considerable mental instability and sort of sorrow. You know, I'm avoiding clinical language, right? Which isn't so helpful. Um, and so there were things at various times in my life that I came across just inadvertently, or that gave me the impetus to continue or to take the next step, even in a direction I didn't know what the direction was. For instance, in this book is a biography, a little biographical essay of a Buryat teacher named Bidya Dandaran. And I came across this in about 1974. And in a bookstore, actually the 8th Street bookstore in Greenwich Village in New York. And I I thought, and I read it and I thought, what an extraordinary thing. Because it's an amazingly tragic story um, about a person, an enormously gifted person who ended up in one concentration camp after another. And what he did was he devoted himself to figuring out a way of teaching Buddhist philosophy and practice in a way that was completely applicable to that situation. And that just struck me as such an extraordinary thing to do. Um, and so that just sat in the back of my uh, memory. And then I was talking with the people at Tricycle, and this was when I started I did a thing on the end of the world, and and I asked the editor then, they're named Emma Varvalukas, who's a wonderful person, very smart, and I said, what do people of your generation see? You know, how do you feel about what's happening here? And she said, despair and lack of model. So then that reminded me of Vidya Dandaran. And in researching that, I found his predecessor who and teacher who I didn't know a thing about, uh, Lobsang Sidanov, who was a person who proclaimed himself a king to save a population of Buryat people in Central Asia at a time right after all the major revolutions when Central Asia was full of private armies, just and crazy people running them. And he got together with about 14,000 families, and they said we're a kingdom, and because we are a Buddhist kingdom, we are non-violent. And he got away with this for a year. And finally he got arrested, and the white armies were all defeated, and because and in the western part of the country, so then they were able to move east and get rid of all these guys in the center. And he was in some sort of military prison, and he died. Or
Mm.
I don't think nobody really exactly knows. But I thought these people are in a certain way models. They're not successful. I mean, they don't come out and supervene. They did something with a great deal of courage and integrity, no matter what happened. They were in their consideration. It was beyond, will this work? So I thought that they were in some ways models for that we have available to us. So unfortunately, the people at Tricycle thought this liked this idea, and so I got to write it.
Mm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Douglas, I was going to ask you about Vidyadandram, because that essay just blew me away. It's so compellingly written, and certainly a story I'd never heard before. I urge anyone listening to get this book, if only to read that. But what's so wonderful about your book is you can page through, and say, oh, I feel like reading about this today, and then just be taken on a trip. And How I Stumbled to the Vanished Sage is the name of this chapter. I cannot tell you what a great heart connection that felt like, reading about this model, and what a perfect name for it, who is not well known. Just thank you for it, and I mean, it's just such a wonderful book to pick and choose, and therefore I think it's going to become a very well-worn book when it's in my hands. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And since you've already discussed it, I'm led back to a question about how you found your first teacher. How did you find Chogyam Trungpa? I mean, he's legendary and had such a great influence on so many people, and continues to do so to this day, through his wonderful ability to communicate to Western students in a Western population these teachings. How did you find him, and what transpired, afterwards?
Well, a lot, but I don't think I don't know why, but I went to a talk he was giving very, very early on. I remember the whole thing very well. And I thought, I should probably do this, but I'm not going to do this. And so a couple of years later, a friend invited me to come to the then Tale of the Tiger. And I did. And that was kind of that. And he said, why don't you come to Boulder? And I wasn't doing anything that required me to be anywhere. So that was that. I think the thing with Rinpoche is he was the most alive person. So it didn't really matter to me that he was Buddhist or anything. And you thought, this is alive. And I don't know about this, So it was also scary. But it was just the sheer vitality. So that was how it worked.
So it wasn't a seeking, it was a stumbling into somehow.
I'd say stumbling has been pretty much my mode.
Your MO.
Yeah, my MO.
Yeah.
And from that point of view, I've been super lucky, because
Luck has something to do with it, yeah.
it does.
Yeah, it does. But what a beautiful writer. Is this a book that you give such gracious gratitude to everyone who helped you put this together? Did you have an inkling for a while that you would collect these essays and compile them for? No. Yeah.
Not for quite a while. You know, I did a bunch of them, and then at a certain point, there was just a pile of them, and I thought, you know, I can do this. And also, I had discovered that you can produce books yourself, which makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Because and that happened because first off, Wisdom Publications published the first Gesar book that I did. And the second one, which I thought was, I really liked a lot better. And of those, I like the second one the most. The guy who was, Gene Smith was then their acquisition editor, and he wrote back saying, oh, and he said, every good thing you could possibly say about a book like this, you know. And he said, but I don't recognize what you translated. And I said, oh, I didn't. And he said, oh, we don't publish fiction. And that was devastating. So then I had to figure out something to do. And so then I began figuring, and it became much easier to publish things yourself and far less expensive. You know, you can just use the Amazon stuff. So that's really where I was thinking. But then I always send stuff around first and see what happens. And I was very lucky in finding the Aerosmith people and Askold. I mean, you know, so that worked. That was great.
Douglas,
please.
would you read your next selection to us?
Are we coming in the home stretch?
No, this is going too quickly.
That's very nice of you. Okay, where are we here? Okay. This is from the section on music. And this was dedicated to Peter Serkin, who was a longtime friend of both Debbie and mine, who died recently or last year, and was in his way a great practitioner, in a very secret way, and a stupendous artist of great inwardness and courage. And also he was funny. So that was, anyhow, so this was dedicated, this was and remains dedicated to him. So this is beginning sort of in the middle. A student took the renowned Tibetan teacher Rabjam Rinpoche to hear a concert of Western classical symphonic music. At the end, Rinpoche asked, do you listen to this music horizontally or vertically? Night Rain at Guangzhou, a poem by Yang Wan Li. The river is clear and calm. A fast rain falls in the gorge. At midnight, the cold splashing sound begins, like thousands of pearls spilling onto a glass plate, each drop penetrating the bone. In my dream, I scratch my head and then get up to listen. I listen and listen until the dawn. All my life, I have heard rain, and I am an old man. But now, for the first time, I understand the sound of spring rain on the river at night. 900 years ago, Yang dreamed he woke as a storm broke around him on the river where his boat was anchored. But unsure of whether he was dreaming or awake, he listened, and a new understanding of rain came to him. Now, here, miraculously beyond such concepts as awake or dream, now or then, Yang gives us the presence of that moment again. And with it, he shares a sense of sound not constrained by space and time. So simple, so complex. Even if we may be clinging to a single mind stream, a single self, there are so many strands in this incident. Polyphony, deploying many voices simultaneously, is perhaps the most extraordinary characteristic of Western classical music. Notated scores have made the extensive development of highly complex polyphonic music possible. And so we have a long tradition that continually finds new life in complex sound structures. As members of the audience, we listen not just for a melody or a rhythm, but we strive to open our ears to hear all the notes, all the rhythms, all the balances and dynamics with an evolving oral architecture that rises and vanishes in time. This kind of attention lets us listen to not just one sequence of sounds, but several simultaneously. We follow the interweaving melodies and find ourselves also in the unsuspected spaces between them. And there emerges a kind of sound architecture as notes dissolve and others begin, then remain in the air for differing extents of time. Composers and performers give us passage into these structures, and we, the audience, join together to explore them. The natural expanse, free from seeking cultivation and definitions, receives the awakened state. As a mountain receives the light of the sun, moon, and stars, receives blankets of snows, receives torrents of rain from clouds, receives the life cycle of insects, worms, germs, birds, foxes, wolves, and beetles, receives cold winds, spring breezes in oak, cedar pine, maple, brushwood, receives cascades of melting water, receives avalanches of rocks, receives fire, receives hunters, pilgrims, merchants, lovers on the run. Allowing goals to determine how we cultivate mind radically reduces the expanse, quality, and depth, as well as overall movement of what we understand, feel, see, know, share, and so forth. Choosing actions solely on the basis of their intended outcome is the root of our ecological catastrophe. How crucial, then, to attend to the random, the puzzling, the strangely beautiful, the unforeseen, the irrelevant, the rejected, the peripheral, the ever elusive, the flirty, the unconnected, the gap. How crucial to know that we cannot possess our experience. Thank you very much.
Douglas, thank you. We're gonna take some time now for people to ask questions. So
Okay.
I hope that's okay. And
Sure.
we're gonna, what we'd like to ask is if people raise their hands, you can either raise your hand or there's a way on the bottom that you can electronically raise your hand, and Mary B or I will call you and call on you, and then just unmute yourself and please ask your question. And when you're done, don't forget to remute yourself. If you're not able, if you don't have a microphone on your computer, you can also type into chat and we will read it aloud. So and the formal part of this is just gonna go for 15 more minutes, but I just wanted to say that Douglas has agreed, I hope, to stay a half an hour after that, so we'll have plenty of time for questions. And we understand there's a lot of old friends and family here too, so please join in. Thank you.
So who would like to go first? Who has a question for our guest? The first person can just unmute themselves and speak up. How's that? Break the ice.
Paula, you can go ahead.
We good? Yeah. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say hello, Douglas. It's Paula McGinnis.
Hey, how are you?
Fancy meeting you here.
Yes, thank you.
I knew that you'd be here tonight, and I'm looking forward to it. And it's good to see you. You look wonderful. And I
Thank
hope
you.
you're
You
well. And congratulations on the book.
Thank you very much.
It's been really interesting. I've enjoyed it.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Douglas, I also wanted to say hi. Gordon St. Clair. I think the last
Hi.
time I saw you might have been in Colorado, actually. I was probably about this big. And just really want to say how wonderfully impressed and how much respect I have for your work, by the way. I think that you're really beautiful and very succinct and bold, capturing of what I think is a really truly liminal space that I think that I really am honored to have the opportunity to have been able to hear you read some of your work today, but also that your commitment to really, and I think you succinctly so grabbed it in the last little bit of the last reading that you had, this idea that by trying to hold it, we lose it. By trying to, capture this thing, that we can in many ways lose the gift of what the thing is that we were meant to see in the first place. And I think that that was beautifully articulated, sir. And I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. I don't think it's actually a problem that we can't hold on to it.
No, and I would love to hear more what you think about it. Exactly. Yes.
We can't. So we have to have the confidence that it's actually part of our world and will constantly reemerge or reemerge in a new form, actually. So otherwise you try and hold on to it, or you try to not hold on to it, which both of which will make you, unhappy. But the confidence that some form of inspiration is always on the go, seems to be. So it's great to see you. I wouldn't have recognized you.
It's been a while, Douglas. It's been a while. But yeah, I think, the other thing too is the courage. And the one thing I think that's so clearly evident in your work, and the one thing that I think is, so not to be taken in any way for granted is the courage and the confidence in the that comes with this understanding. And I think for a lot of folks where courage has been a little bit hard to find these days, and change has been a little bit difficult, whether from our trying to hold things or for the way that you so well described it. It's lovely, sir. It's beautiful work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lindsay, I think, Lindsay St. Clair, I think you have a question.
Unmute. Hi.
Hi.
I'm actually Gordon's wife. So
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen you. I don't know if I've met you in person, but
We've never met.
But I admire you greatly.
Oh, thank you.
I thought it was really wonderful when you were talking musically about the way people understand music, and music is a language. It's something that it's, I mean, as somebody that doesn't really read music, I'm sure you as a musician understand it much better than I do, but there's there's a real language to it. And I think it's such a beautiful thing that you talked about, that as people listen to the language of it, there's something that happens. There's kind of like a brush with something greater. And I guess I was thinking about the fact that you talked about, what did you call it?
Polyphony?
Polyphony. Not only is that something really special, but it's something that we need to, on some level, be educated towards. We need to have been exposed on some level to hear the in-between spaces you were talking about, which I think is a really awesome thing. And going back to the way you talk about these kind of Eastern concepts, I just thought it was interesting in terms of how we need, on some level, to have an understanding,
Mhm.
a language of it in order to fill in the spaces. So
Mhm.
I was just curious about how you connect the musicality with what you were talking about in terms of Eastern religion.
Um, I think, well, of course, when you say Eastern religions, there's a big bunch of them. And like there are a lot of kinds of Hinduism, which are actually quite different from the lots of kinds of Buddhisms.
Mhm.
But in the sense that Buddhism is about how to look at things without preconceptions, without all the things you usually rely on, this made me more open to music,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
So I think that's about it.
Mhm.
You know, we just venture on, don't we?
Mhm.
You know, and there's the do your best part of it, which is important actually, but there's also to see things in ways you haven't seen them before when they present themselves to you. And we all both struggle with that and are so happy about it. So it's always there. And I don't think it's a particularly religious thing. You know, I mean, a lot of the most fabulous things are Christian masses and all of that. Yeah. So we have these things coming out of all kinds of backgrounds, is the point, and we meet beyond whatever the specifics are in that. Yeah. Thank you.
You know, one of the things that I feel as a theme in the book, and the book is very dreamlike to me. I feel like I sort of wander through it and in different places that are all connected, but not in some kind of super rational way. But there's sort of things come together and things fall apart, and things come together and things fall apart. And when you talk about aging, I've heard you talk about the loss and what comes as a gift during that time. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little more about that experience of the gifts of this time in a person's life, you know, our older age.
Sure. I actually feel kind of well. I think it's an extraordinary time, and so it's not getting old is not to enter into a defective version of being young or middle aged, or a more compromised version. Obviously, physically it is, but what I sort of what's happening to us is when we're younger, we're trying to grab the world and find a place in the world and hold on to a place in the world and hold on and then give that to somebody else or get it into a condition when we can give it to somebody else, that kind of thing. And those happen at various times in your life. And when you're getting old, the world is moving away from you. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can't, you know, talk like a teenager or do those awful things or wear clothes that are too young or all that stuff. You can't do it. And, and but as the world moves away, we also see patterns that we never saw before. Patterns of growing out, you know, in both in people's lives, but also patterns of looking out the window or patterns in music for that matter. And it's not an accident that some of the greatest pieces of music come from what is like Beethoven's late period, or we have the late period of Stravinsky, or we have the late period of Titian, you know. And so things happen and people, or Shakespeare, neither Shakespeare nor Beethoven were chronologically particularly old, but they were nearing their death. So they saw something different. And I think the first time I ever heard that, when I first heard a late Beethoven sonata, I had never heard anything like this. I thought, what is it? What is it? You know, and you can't follow it. I don't think you can't go that, you can't follow it. You can only listen to it, and they're overwhelmingly moving, but it's like something else. So I realized there's this, and it's an important time, and the fact that we're in a culture that doesn't attend to this in the way that, say, traditional Asian societies, particularly, and maybe African societies too, have done and do, is problematic for us, I think. So from that point of view, I feel fairly aggressive about being old, you know. When Rucker one time said to me, "Oh, age is you're only as old as you think you are," I said, "Only young people think that." So yeah, I think we should take it seriously and get into it.
Get into being at this point in our lives.
Yeah, because I mean, we are. You are eternally youthful, of course.
Yeah.
You look great.
Thank you. You too.
Haircut.
Who has a question for our lovely guest? Please feel free to speak right up. Amelie.
Amelie.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good.
I'm a great fan of your Gesar books.
Oh, thank you.
And I loved how I really resonate with that statement of I would have been a musician in this life if I had been able to. I feel the same way. And the sense that this is not so much a question, but maybe just a reflection of sort of what I've been experiencing as I was listening to you. What I really appreciate about your writing is this sense of nonlinear space, you know, and it's so rich. There's so much sensory detail and sensory enjoyment. It's not even that you describe, it's you experience as you write, and one experiences along with you. And what I love about it is that there's this sense that it puts you in a big space where you feel like your mind could be that way regularly. And then in a certain way, it's a little bit like how you described from Rinpoche, you know, the sense of aliveness and the sense of permission to be in that vast space and to be that enjoying of it. And so much of our daily life is so linear. And I find one of the things that I love about people who are older is this sense that their mind has this vastness to it and unhurriedness to it. And when you encounter it, then you become unhurried too, because you feel like there's this accommodation.
Mhm.
And I was just curious how you think about sort of daily life in that way, because for me, it's easy to get into that when I listen to, music or symphonies or look at art, but it's hard for me to find that in daily life, And I wondered if you had anything to say about sort of how do you come in and out? Or how do you merge that space?
Yeah. It's given to you, isn't it? So it comes to you. You don't have to do anything. So it's when we just sort of take a little. I mean, of course, we're chugging along, and getting the day done. But the day also provides all kinds of weird little things, and usually they're irritating, or you know what I mean. Or one can, if you're in a hurry, they're irritating.
Mm.
I mean, we live in this building and there are many, many old people. Right now, fewer than there used to be because they died or they moved. But well, it happens, and so you see people going through all kinds of things all the time, and I don't know. I mean, I look out the window. It's just it's always great.
Mhm.
I think it's more the sense of what comes to you rather than what you do to make it happen. That's all
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone have a question?
Orestes, would you like to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I just clearly, from the title, in the Anthropocene era, this book, correct me if I'm wrong, it feels as if it's written in response to external stressors, in light of the changes in the world, recent changes in the world, things of that nature. And in both of the pieces that you read, there is, to me anyway, a clear underscoring of the blurring of the lines between the self and the external environment, the universe that gave rise to the self. In the second piece, it seems to be a cause of concern. As you can, if that line is blurred, you feel, every degradational step in your environment, you feel that personally. But in the sickness piece, there's kind of a strange comfort in the blurring of those lines. Just knowing that you, just feeling that oneness with the universe that gave rise to you. I'm wondering if you revisit this work now since it's done, if you find yourself picking it up and you find it as a source of comfort in the current climate.
I don't reread it except for this. I actually made it a discipline quite a while ago to kind of forget what I had done. Because it's out there and it does what it does. And actually, as you were saying this to me, I was thinking of something that, I could have put this in. I had a wonderful sister-in-law, Margan, my older brother's wife. She had terrible, terrible cancer, where the therapies, they took her to the edge, just the absolute edge of being alive. And she told me afterwards, she was a slightly hard-nosed person, lapsed Irish Catholic. And she said, you know, when I was in that state, I could see every person who came in the room, what kind of compassion they had. She said, I saw that every one of them wanted to be helpful and restorative to me. But some people just couldn't do it. And she said, I could not only see it then, I can still see it. You know, so I could have talked about that, but you know, so thank you for reminding me, you know, but it's, no, I don't read it. I go on, it's always to find something else. And it did come out, of course, out of what's up. Yeah, thank you. How did you get named Orestes, if I might ask?
To be honest, it was the only name both sides of the family could agree on.
Yes, I have a friend named Johnny, whose father was a classicist and wanted to name him Aegistus, and his mother objected.
Yeah, go figure.
Douglas, at this age, would you be willing to share what your formal practice is? And do you have a teacher, and do you feel like if you don't, are you searching for one? And maybe tell us a little bit about, you know, you're like 20 years older, 20 plus years older than me. So I'm just curious what the view is from your perspective on this. Thanks.
I'd say practice has just become the simplest thing possible, you know. So sitting like that. I don't have a teacher. Trungpa Rinpoche left enough. I don't feel I have, if I could conceivably feel that I had fulfilled all the things that he taught, then maybe I'd look for somebody, but then maybe somebody would start looking for me. I don't know, you know, but so it's just as it is. I don't feel the need of that at all, because in a way he is more alive than ever and more annoying, you know. So it's pretty natural, I would say. I mean, other people do feel they need to have somebody, you know, to study with.
That definitely resonates for me. Just the simplicity of literally just sitting.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much there. And not really feeling a calling for another teacher, having worked with 3 people formally, you know, that was a lot. That really filled me up with some good stuff, and not sure what more I would ask.
Well, when you know, then you will, you know. But yeah.
I'm just curious what you meant by annoying. Like in what ways?
Nagging.
So you hear his voice as a
Never enough.
Mm.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. Just I don't feel very self-satisfied. That's for sure. It sort of prevents that. You know, like, oh, how about that?
Yes.
No. So.
Douglas, what are you looking forward to next? What are your
Dinner.
Dinner, after dinner, tomorrow morning when you wake up first thing? What you know, and you know, after these grueling several years that we've had, more than several years, particularly the last, what gives you hope? What gives you spark? What What inspires and motivates you right now?
I have no idea. I mean, Deborah is fabulous to live with. She's a wonderfully inspiring person. She's always doing things and thinking of things and finding new things. It's great. And she's giving things too. So there's that. I mean, I just feel very lucky to be in a world where this is sort of or I look at the window, and there's something. So.
Are you reading anything? Right. Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yes, and it's a book I really want to plug. Hang on, let me find it. Where'd it go? Oh, no. It's not in this room. It's a book called Finding the Raga by Amrit. Anyhow, it's about Indian music, but it's also about Western culture and Indian culture, because he was raised in a westernized Indian family in India. And here it is. See? There it is. It's from Amrit Chowdhury. It's fabulous, fabulous. It's really, buy it, please. No, it's really great. And it's an extraordinary book. So yeah, that's what I'm reading right now.
And where can folks get your book?
Thank you. The Aerosmith Press people have a page. That's Aerosmith. It's named after William Aerosmith, the translator, but also just Aerosmith. And also it's on Amazon. So it's not too hard to get.
And if someone were to want to have a signed copy, how would one do that?
Oh. Tell you what, maybe how would it work if you just wrote me and said you wanted, and I signed a piece of paper and you stuck it in there? That would be the easiest. Otherwise, you could send the book and I'll send the book back.
Right. Okay, cool. Got it.
Hello, Susan.
Can I ask what you're listening to musically? Anything in particular?
Yeah, we just came across, I mean, YouTube is stupendous, They had a production of Magic Flute done by a amazing director, Achim Fryer, who's also a painter. And he's quite old, and he gets at very interesting things. So it's not just Eurotrash kind of just a bunch of weird stuff to make the opera look interesting. It's actually, it does look weird what he does, but it has a deep sense of structure and things like that. That's what I'm listening to right now.
Thanks.
Sure.
Well, I propose we turn off the recording, and I know that there's a lot of family and friends, and we can just more informally chat, or you all can chat.